Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Hi, Josie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. It's so great to speak to you in person.
I know, it's so nice to finally talk face to face.
I agree. It's been too long, and I just want to start out by saying thank you for taking the time out today to chat with us.
Oh yeah, of course. Thank you for asking me to be on.
What we'll do is I'll probably get you to start telling your story for those folks that may not have heard it yet from the beginning. And then at the end, we finished up with some Q&A and just some nice questions. So I really looking forward to hear that. So yeah, Josie, let's talk about your story. Let's talk about where you grew up, how you grew up, sort of what got you into. I know you became vegan at a really young age, and you did it for 14 years, which is absolutely incredible. You had some issues prior to going vegan, but why don't you explain to the folks how that all transpired?
Yeah, of course. So going back to my childhood, I always ate the standard American diet, but I've actually never really liked sweets. So I always did like what my parents called real food better. So I've always been like, I've never been much of a sweets person. And that's, I think, a part of why like doing really low carb works for me, but I'll get to that. Anyway, when I got to be going towards my preteen years, I was a little chubby. I don't even think I was like medically overweight, but it was just a thing that was in my head. And I decided that I wanted to lose 20 pounds and it became an eating disorder. I just got way too like obsessed with losing weight once I started because I thought it was so impossible. And then when I finally started losing weight, it became like a kind of like addictive thing. Like I basically developed anorexia when I was 13. And the worst of it only lasted for 6 months, but I did permanent mental damage, which I would say now presently I'm the most healed from than I've ever been. I feel the most like distance from that part of my life than ever now. But yeah, so I developed an eating disorder. I went to the doctor with my mom after this 6-month period. I got to be really underweight. And the doctor woke me up by telling me, you're going to die if you don't stop doing this. And my parents obviously were like starting to consider other medical options that they had if I just wasn't going to eat. So finally I woke up and I started trying to eat healthy again, or like eat enough again. And it obviously didn't go very smoothly. I dealt with binging. I dealt with like terrible mental health issues. And, you know, through that process, I got back to a healthy weight, just like not, I didn't view it that way. Like I was just mentally not okay. But during that time of recovery, I would say maybe about a year after I started recovering from the eating disorder, I went to this concert with one of my friends, and I think my dad took us at the time. I was only like 13. And we were just walking around by the merch tents, and we saw a PETA tent set up through, you know, with all the merch tents. And I think they were playing Earthlings. They were handing out flyers. And I was in this mental state where I was so susceptible to a message like that. And I honestly, genuinely always loved animals. I've always been, I wouldn't say always, but like as I started to get older, I was becoming more health conscious because I have diseases like diabetes and cancer in my family. So it's not like I just, it's like in every aspect, veganism appealed to me because I believed it was the healthiest. I believed it saved animals. And I believed that it was this like way of eating that would just like grant you this magical key to like never having to worry about your weight. So, and you know, I thought like it gave you perfect skin too. I believed all this BS about it. But that was because after I went to that, after I saw that PETA tent, I went home with the flyer that day and I watched Earthlings. And I've always been like an all or nothing type of person. I became vegan overnight after that, and I was only 13. I wasn't even buying my own groceries. I did it with the advice on the PETA website. So I was basically, I've always known that eating fruits and veggies were like a healthy part of a diet. Like I knew that and believed that when I was a kid. So I approached it in a way where I probably ate like half whole unprocessed foods, and then I replaced the meat and the dairy with the horrendous meat and dairy substitutes that were out at that time, because this was, I want to say, like 2009, 2010. And that was my diet going into veganism. I altered things as time went on. I followed Freely and Durian Rider for a time, and I thought that if any of the audience members don't know, they preached raw foodism, and specifically fruitarianism. Then they decided that wasn't working for them for a little bit, and they did 80-10-10 and Raw Till 4, which is like eat fruit throughout the day and then eat cooked food at night. But it was like at least an unprocessed foods diet. So I tried that. I tried both of those things for a time. I remember probably because it was the time in my life where I was eating the least amount of fat than ever. My mental health was so bad. I remember feeling so depressed and just not really even knowing why. So I was never satisfied from the food I ate throughout the entirety of veganism, but I was just so indoctrinated, and I believed so hard that it was the healthiest, it was the most ethical. And, finally, when I did see my own condition that I developed go into remission from eating animal products, that was what really, dug the nail in for me, that I just believed lies.
That's thank you, Josie. Thank you for that. One question I have for you, and we'll continue on with your journey after that, but how were your foods prior to veganism? Did you eat meat prior to veganism? Did you have a period of vegetarianism or anything like that where you'd cut out red meats alone, or did you just go straight into veganism?
I want to say that after I started recovering from the eating disorder, I did go vegetarian, and that was, I don't think, based on anything but just like coming up with it myself and like thinking that it was the healthiest. I didn't see anything that really like influenced me that way, but I want to say that I did become vegetarian for a period of time after I started recovering from the eating disorder. And before that, because I was trying to eat like healthy, I was only eating things like chicken. And I think that was it. That's the only type of meat that I remember eating around that time in my life. But before that, when I was younger, I would eat like anything. Like Italian food was my favorite. So I would eat red meat a lot, like as a kid.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Pete, the folks may not know, for you and I, our trajectories are pretty similar in terms of what happened to us, how we sort of fell into the vegan way of eating. I was vegetarian for literally decades, and I initially did it to impress a young lady when we were dating way back in high school days for me, which is crazy. But and then I fell victim to a lot of the propaganda. I was already vegetarian at the time, and I was a chunky vegetarian. And I think you'll see, if you ever see some of the pictures that I post in my vegetarian years, I was quite overweight. I was eating a lot of processed garbage, vegetarian garbage, a lot of carbohydrates. I was stressed out like you, had mental fatigue, and I thought, well, this will be the next step. Going vegan, I've heard it's so positive for the body. It's the best diet that you can do. It's good for the planet, good for the health. I watched all the Forks Over Knives, all the documentaries. And then my wife and I at the time said, yep, this is it. Let's go for it. Here we go. And we went vegan and did it for 6 years. And then my health started to fall off a cliff by the 5th year. So we're up to the point where you have gone vegan. Did you feel all right for the first little while, or did you see improvements at all, anything wise, the goals that you had set for yourself by becoming vegan?
I think that I wanted to believe that my skin improved, that I was feeling so much better, that like I I was happy with my physique, which I was so young. It wasn't really something that I was like, it wasn't a goal necessarily that I had in mind, that like I wanted to develop a certain physique. I just knew from, again, like kind of being indoctrinated as a kid, that like being thin is the ideal like beauty standard. It was really just that. There wasn't like a specific goal. But I really feel like I don't remember any profound changes. If anything, I might have just been feeling better from just eating like a normal amount of calories versus restricting. I only really like restricted severely for about 6 months, but that might have been the main reason, honestly, why I was feeling better, because I was finally eating at least an adequate amount of calories.
Yeah, that makes sense. For myself, my goal, besides the ethical reasons and the betterment of the planet, my health goals were to lose the weight that I had gained as a vegetarian, and just to start feeling more active. And I will admit, for the first little while, because I cut out a lot of the processed crap. My wife, who popped in a little earlier, you may have seen her pop in the background.
Yeah.
She became a fully certified plant-based chef with me at the time. So she got trained and certified to be a plant-based chef. So we ate really well, no processed stuff, all whole foods, plant-based. And for a while, I felt pretty good. The first couple of years, my energy came up. I lost weight. I was looking good. But then, as I said, as things start to go along and the deficiencies popped up their head in this diet, and I started to get the brain fog, I started to get the irritable bowel symptoms, all those type of things. How long did it take you once you made a switch to vegan to start seeing the negative, let's call them, side effects?
The most negative side effects I can really pinpoint happened at year 10 of me being vegan. And that's why when people come to my page and they say like I've been vegan for 2 years and I'm doing great. So I don't understand why like you're saying this, you're lying. And I'm like, just wait, just give it enough time. So the really severe digestive issues started at year 10, but I do remember a few instances before that of having really severe digestive upset, but it would be like a day and then done. Like it would go back to normal. But I will add that throughout the entirety of being vegan for me, I really never remember having a normal stool. And I know it's getting into like TMI territory, but I just never remember that ever, like at any point. So I really don't ever remember having normal digestion. I always either remember being constipated or just like never really being able to go to the bathroom. So as I said, I did remember minor digestive issues. The main negative side effects that I experienced, I would say like 2 or 3 years into it, were really horrible mental health. Like truly, I've never been diagnosed with depression, but feeling the lowest that I have in my entire life for no real apparent reason. It was all always tied back to the value that I've always put on my appearance and my weight, which is like so sad to say. But at that point too, I would say like 2 to 3 years into veganism, I was in no way overweight, but I was probably up to about 30 pounds heavier than I am now. And I just remember feeling like I wanted to lose weight again, but I had no idea how to actually do it. I felt like it was so impossible. And because of that, sadly, like it really ties back to why I was feeling so depressed. But I know now if I'd only been eating like a low carb diet that included animal products, I could have managed my weight like that. Like it's like effortless for me now. So it's sad, but it's just a process. Like I wouldn't know what I know now without going through that.
Absolutely. Josie, I don't know. Let's talk a little bit during the vegan years before we get into where you add animal foods back in. But did you notice, like I noticed myself, and in this as a young woman, the vegan agenda is really geared highly towards women in general. But I found when I was a vegan, going back a few years now, there were men in the movement, but it was primarily young women that I noticed that had subscribed to this way of eating. Did you notice that too? I mean, I was out there. I wasn't very pushy. I just told people I was vegan. I had the T-shirts like you. I would wear and go around to the various events. But how about? Did you notice that too?
I did, totally. I've always, because I got into veganism at so much earlier of a time than like I would say the people that are getting into it now. In 2009, when I was starting to go on YouTube, it was all women. And maybe that is why I've always viewed it as a more like feminine uh like inclination to be that way. And when I see men that are vouching so hard for it, and I don't want to give any names, but then you like look at their physique too. If they look like really fit, but you most of the time you can tell that they're on steroids. But yeah, that's just my own observations. But yes, I totally noticed that it was more of a like a female oriented thing. Earlier on, I would say there are a lot more men that are vegan now.
Yes, I would agree with you. Looking now at the vegans now, I see a lot more men involved. You know, as we start going on with the vegan years and getting to where you became really sick and the ulcerative colitis cropped up its head, I can tell you for me, and you use a good term that I was listening to you say, you know, end stage veganism, which is a very real thing. For me, oh my goodness, I was so severely ill. Like you, I was put on disability for my job, or I had to go on disability because I couldn't function. The brain fog crept in. I was losing weight at a massive rate. I got down to 127 pounds at 6'2" at my lightest. And no matter what I was forcing in my mouth, it was just not helping. My skin was cracking. My hair was falling out. My teeth and gums were bleeding. I know you've mentioned those things. And then, like you, I had the severe blood in my stool and severe constipation. And, you know, this all happened to me right at the time COVID hit. So when COVID hit, because we're in Bermuda, I couldn't get to the hospital. I had flown away to get checked out. They were going to do a colonoscopy, but they found a bacterial infection in me, which they couldn't perform the procedure because of the bacterial infection. Came back, COVID hit, hospital locks down. So I had to figure out a way for myself on a way out of this. And yeah, it was just a crazy time. How did this all transpire for you?
So I mean, I can totally relate to that too, with you saying that you were losing weight at a rapid rate. I know too, people in my life that had been around for a while that knew my history probably did just think I had an eating disorder again. But at that point, I truly had no control over it. I wished it wasn't happening. But yeah, at that time too, I got down to a horribly underweight state. And I essentially what happened, so I had gone through two really bad flares at about year 10 of veganism, and I had a lot of the same symptoms as you. It started out with just really severe stomach pain in my lower intestine, and then I developed a low-grade fever. And I remember the first time I had a flare, I just couldn't go to the bathroom. I was like severely constipated. So as the fever got higher, I think that was when I went to the doctor. They told me this time as well to go right to the hospital. So I went to the hospital. I was admitted to the hospital. And I think that due to some other complication, they couldn't do a colonoscopy. I think because it was just too short of a period of time that I was there, because I was only there for 3 days. But they did plenty of tests. At the time, they diagnosed me with diverticulitis, and they gave me antibiotics. So I took those for the following couple of weeks until they said to stop. And I thought that was that, like that it wasn't going to happen again. And the issue did go away, but again, after that, I still never had normal digestion. I always either had diarrhea or I was constipated. There was no in between. There was no like healthy stool anywhere in that couple of months that led up to the next flare that I truly, if I didn't go into the hospital when I did, I definitely would have died. So what happened with this? So I got a little better throughout the next couple of months. Then I would say when my next semester started in school in around September to October, I started noticing these symptoms again, but I knew it was like an issue of the same nature, but the symptoms were more severe and they were different. So I started getting diarrhea multiple times a day, and it just kept getting worse. I started noticing blood in my stool, and again, it just kept getting worse, like more and more blood as time went on. I had severe fatigue. I was losing weight, as you mentioned, rapidly. I couldn't eat because I was in so much pain after every single meal. So I was getting to the point where I was afraid to eat anything. So obviously as well, I started developing issues just based on the deficiencies I was experiencing. So my skin was really dry and I was super pale. I looked like a corpse. Like, I don't, that's kind of graphic and extreme. I didn't actually look like a corpse, but I looked like I was on like my deathbed by the
Jo Josie, sorry to interrupt you. You know, it's not, it's graphic, but I had friends because COVID had hit and because I was going through all this, I very rarely made it out because I felt so awful. I was kind of bedbound and very fatigued. But when I did to go to the grocery shop, because in Bermuda we had to grocery shop by last name to keep the numbers down in the store. So you lined up outside if your last name was L to whatever M. And so anyway, I ran into a couple of folks and they literally told me, "Hey man, what's wrong with you? You look like you're dying. Are you really sick or is something going on?" Like it really, I mean, you see that before and after picture, and that wasn't even the worst picture that I found that I put up. It just is amazing to, and I looked in the mirror, and we're going to talk about this right now, is my next stage when I, even at that sick, was I, like you, I've heard you say this, you doubled down on the vegan diet to try and find a cure for yourself. And I did the same thing. I thought, there's no way this can be the vegan diet. It's the best diet in the world. I'm going to hammer down that nail even further. And it just made it worse. How about you?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly the approach that I took. And I can totally relate to you too on saying that you didn't want to go out and that you were probably embarrassed and self-conscious. I was, I got my bachelor's degree in fashion business management from FIT. So I was going to a fashion school too. And with the way I looked, I just knew everybody had to assume I was anorexic again. And the sad thing is that it wasn't true, but I just had to accept it. Like, there was not really going to be much, like, nobody was really going to listen. Not that I was really ever accused of that, but I could just tell because it was like my third year in school. So people, like, we knew each other already. They were definitely like, what is going on with you? So that was the approach that I took. After I was experiencing all those really severe symptoms, I was admitted to the hospital again. The doctor did tell me my potassium was so low that if I hadn't gone into the hospital when I did, I would have died. Like, it could have been like a day later if I hadn't done it. So it was kind of like an intervention, like by some, like fate or something, whatever. So I was in the hospital for 7 days this time, and I was in much worse shape. I don't even know all the stuff that they gave me in the hospital. They did so many tests. They did a partial colonoscopy, which was how they diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis, and they put me on a corticosteroid after I left the hospital, prednisone. And I took the prednisone for the amount of time they told me to take it. That was honestly, like, as much as I'm still very, like, I still try to kind of be a purist, and I don't like taking medications, but if I hadn't taken that prednisone, nothing else was going to heal my body at that time. Like, it was the only thing that was going to heal me at the time. So there is definitely a time and a place for things like that. So the prednisone really, like, my body healed very quickly, to the point that it could. And the following weeks after that, and I finally got to, I remember the first time that I had a normal stool, which was like insane to me. After that couple of weeks, it was insane in a good way, obviously. So the doctors were also all not on the same page, which also made me very suspicious. I had one that made me double down on veganism because he told me that red meat and dairy aggravate colitis. So it's good that you're vegan, like, you're like a step ahead. So I had that. I had this other GI doctor that was convinced I had Crohn's disease, but literally told me, you don't have the antibodies for it, but I still think you have Crohn's. So I need to do this. I can't remember what the test was called, but she wanted to do this very specific test so that she could prescribe me a medication for Crohn's. And I was like so sick still at the time that I was not interested in arguing with this woman or confronting her, but I just yesed her to death and then just didn't do what she told me because I was like, this lady probably honestly has some kind of an inkling to get people to take this medication, and I'm not doing it. I didn't believe I had Crohn's disease. I know Crohn's is through your whole digestive system. For me, it's always just been in my colon that I've had these issues. So the doctors all very much confused me. And so I took the prednisone. I was supposed to take another round of it, but in my opinion at the time, I was at the point where I had a normal stool again. I was able to eat. So I was like, I'm not taking this again. So I went and tried to do as much research as I could to prove to myself that you could you could heal colitis naturally on a vegan diet. I remember, I honestly can't remember this YouTube channel now, but there were these two guys who worked with clients on teaching them how to heal colitis on a whole foods plant-based diet. It might have been a raw diet, but I tried to follow their protocol. I tried to take out everything acidic out of my diet. So like coffee was a no-go at the time. So many other things were not, I couldn't include them in my diet. So I tried that for a while. Then eventually I got sick of it. There were like there was so little amount of things that I could eat. So I started adding things back in. And thankfully, the flares never got severe enough throughout the next couple of years until I finally stopped being vegan that I ever had to go back to the hospital. But the whole reason that I even considered stopping being vegan was because so in 2021 last year, my fiance's brother he died in a car accident, like very unexpectedly. And stress has always played a role in this condition for me. So when that happened, I actually started going into what I could see was going to be a terrible flare. It was just getting worse and worse and worse every day. And that was what made me so desperate to find a way of eating that wouldn't keep making me go into digestive or colitis flares. So that was like how I came out of it. And yeah, I totally doubled down on veganism, trying to tell myself that I could heal it on a vegan diet, which for me was not true.
Yeah. First of all, my condolences on the loss. I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, thank you.
And so, yeah, okay. Wow. It's amazing how similar our journeys are our journeys in the trajectory of so Josie, what was the next step for you? What made you say, okay, enough is enough, and plan to add animal foods back in your diet? And what were the first things that you tried? I think if I remember hearing bone broth was one of the first. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was bone broth. I was reading some book and it just happened to have this little paragraph where it talked about how the lack of it was basically saying a vegan diet with no animal nutrients is degenerative for the tissues in the body and especially the brain. And I had seen those kind of statements throughout veganism, but I was in a position where I could have just written them off and not thought about it. But because I read it at that point where I was desperate to heal my colitis or go into remission, it really broke through to me. And I was like, animal foods are the one thing I haven't tried throughout this whole ordeal. So maybe I should just try it. And that was why I decided to have bone broth first, because I figured that was the most like benign thing I could have. So right away, when I started having bone broth, I would say that I did just bone broth and I was eating my usual diet otherwise. Within those like first 2 weeks, I noticed very subtle changes in my skin in like a positive way. And I started to notice my digestive issues actually start to get better. Like my diarrhea was getting better. It was like lessening. And I think like the blood in my stool too was starting to get better. So right away, when I saw those symptoms start to improve, it just made the light bulb go off for me that this is, if it was like logically, I could only assume if I start having other animal products, especially like this is just bone broth, if I have eggs and fish, I might as well see if that might help. And throughout I reintroduce animal products in stages. Throughout every single stage, I saw my digestive issues continually improve to the point where when I did get to the point where I re-included chicken and turkey, that was when I remember I felt so victorious because the blood in my stool went away permanently, and it has not ever come back since then. So it 100%. Nobody is going to convince me now that there weren't nutrients that I was not getting from animal products. Like, essentially, I know that there were nutrients in animal products that I wasn't getting as a vegan that I get now that healed my body.
Absolutely. So that's incredible. So how long? It was just a couple of weeks, and you noticed the ulcerative colitis symptoms go away, Josie? A couple of weeks to a month, maybe?
It was longer than that.
Okay.
So I did reintroduce things very slowly. It was about a 6-month period that it took for me to like get to the point where I could eat beef again because I believe so much propaganda about beef.
Yeah,
So
me
I
too.
would say it was about at the 3-month period that I started eating chicken and turkey again. It took me a while to actually get to the point where I felt like I could eat meat again. So I did like bone broth, fish, shrimp, and eggs again for like a while, like a good couple of weeks. But then, when I got to the point where I had chicken and turkey again, I would say that was about 3 months in. And that was when I saw those really severe colitis symptoms finally go into remission, like permanently, which was the blood in my stool went away. The severe pain after eating was not a thing anymore. I was seeing my skin improve too. So that was kind of like an outward example of my health improving for me. Um, the diarrhea got down to just going once a day. So in that sense, I considered it to be something that was normalizing, but I still had diarrhea. But again, like all of those really severe symptoms were going into remission. Like they were on a trend of going into remission. And really the blood in my stool was the most severe one. So when that went away, that for me was like, okay, my colitis is like in remission basically. But it did take starting a pretty strict carnivore diet for me to actually get my stools to be normal again. I will say that. So
Yeah.
it took, I would say, like in total, from the time I stopped being vegan last May to the time that like my stools finally got back to normal, that was, I want to say, like a 9-month period. And that I only saw the really significant improvements happen in that sense after I started like strict carnivore.
Oh, interesting. For me, what happened was, if you hadn't heard, and for those listeners that are new to my story, is that I got down to a stage where I was so sick, I ended up listening and considering, what can I do here? So I found Sally Norton, the oxalate queen, as she is called, and figured out that there were defense chemicals in plants. So I could have been doing this all wrong. I went down that rabbit hole for a while, lowered the high oxalate vegetables and fruits, started to feel better. In doing so, I came across Dr. Baker's presentation on Joe Rogan, then started to really think about, should I add animal foods back in? Because I was seeing some progress on just even lowering the high oxalate foods that I've been eating. Because Josie, I'll tell you, I had found this vegan doctor online at my end stage veganism when I doubled down, and she was prescribing 3 smoothies a day that were a bag of kale and spinach mix, chia seeds, kiwi fruit, and turmeric altogether, the highest oxalate, and just blend them up and you will heal everything autoimmune. She's still online touting this diet, and she's a physician, and it nearly killed me. It almost killed me.
I believe that.
Yeah. So one of the things I heard you say, Josie, is that, and I'll talk about, my first thing that I added back, because it was the most recently known thing to me being vegetarian, was fish. And because I'm from Bermuda and we can get good fish here, so I added fish first. But you said in an interview that you almost didn't want carnivore to work because of the attachment to veganism that you had. Was it really difficult for you to get that first bites of animal foods back in, being a vegan for so long, even longer than me?
Try. I think because I had like primed myself with having bone broth and I could see that I was starting to improve. It wasn't as hard for me. If I went right from being vegan to eating eggs, I think it would have been a lot harder. But I think I did the right thing for myself by having bone broth first because I think it definitely helps with my gut. Like I didn't really have any digestive issues either when I reintroduced eggs and fish. And I think a part of that was because I was having like animal proteins again through the bone broth, even though it was very it wasn't a lot at the time. It wasn't hard for me because the most important thing for me at that point was to heal my colitis, because there's always been some part of me that does not believe that it's just genetic. Like I totally believe it was caused like by environmental factors, even if I might be more inclined to get it genetically. So that was the most important thing for me. When I saw that improving, I could only assume that it was just the right thing for my body to eat animal foods.
Yeah, absolutely. Josie, let me ask you, when you first started adding stuff back in, did you have any transition issues, digestive issues? Like, I know a lot of people talk, one of the questions, we'll get to the questions at the end, is, fat adaptation. When you added high fat foods back in, did you have any other issues with eating more animal foods?
I think because I know I've heard a lot of people say that they do have that, so that's not to discount that. And I wish I did have a more insightful answer, but I think because I did it so slowly, and even when I added beef back into my diet, I was like, now I add tablespoons of fat to my food. I wasn't doing that yet at the time. I remember I was starting to dabble in things like ancestral supplements and things like that. So any additional beef tallow that I was eating, it was in like one of those little capsules. So it wasn't a lot. I think that's why I did avoid digestive issues, because I did it in such slow stages. So what I remember being like literally scared when I had eggs again that I was going to have a horrible stomach ache, and I had more ease in eating that. Like I wouldn't have even known that I'd eaten anything because I didn't have any digestive upset. So I had more ease when I ate those eggs than I did eating probably most of the foods that I was eating in my diet at the time. So, and then the same thing with fish. I think I had shrimp and then salmon. That was like the first fish I had again. Again, I didn't have any digestive upset, which I don't know, maybe that is a good thing too, because if I had, I probably would have just like written it off really easily and been like, oh, this isn't for me. So I think that if people are having those issues, taking it slowly and like working up to eating more fat is my best advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely was one who had the transition fat adaptation issues, and that's because I knew going into it, my gallbladder had issues. I had digestive issues from way back when, vegetarian days. So like you, I did supplement, and I continue to this day to supplement with betaine HCl and digestive enzymes and ancestral supplements at the beginning, and I still am today. And we'll get into whether you are or not later, and your thoughts on supplementation. But it can be a tricky point for people, and for me it took a good 3 to 4 months before I really became fat adapted. And one of the questions people ask me is, how do you know when you're fat adapted? And I always say, number one, look at your stool. If it's still too loose, or if you're suffering from constipation. And the other is, are you feeling great? Is the energy coming back? Are you, and even without, and first of all, are you not eating carbohydrates? Are you just eating meat and fat? And do you feel your energy and brain fog clearing? Then you'll know that your body's utilizing that fat for benefit, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk quickly, Josie, about one of the surprises for me. And like you, I heard you mention earlier that you had some depression or just low mood on the vegan diet, low feeling, self-esteem. I did not even realize how depressed and anxious I was as a vegan. I mean, now looking back on how I feel now, and if my wife was in this room, she would tell you I'm a completely changed man, like unbelievable. I was so anxious. I barely slept at night. My sleep was terrible, maybe 2 hours every night for years. It was awful. I sleep like a log now. I was anxious all the time, and then the end stages, I was depressed, and I didn't want to admit to that, but you said you were. What are the benefits from adding animal foods back in that you saw change those things for you?
So I would say right from the get-go, I did start to just feel my well-being improving. And like you, I also didn't realize how low I was actually feeling. I think because, sadly, I feel like for most people, especially that when they're eating the standard American diet, it's like a normal thing to feel like depressed or very low. So in a way back then, I thought it was just normal for me to be feeling that way. And it was just something that I had to work through mentally. So I didn't realize how low I was actually feeling. when I did finally start reintroducing animal foods, especially I saw the most profound difference in my mental health and my just general happiness when I started eating beef again. I literally like, it was so weird. The first time I had steak again, I felt this, I don't want to say it was the way that some vegans describe eating steak again. I can't, they describe it very like, like this profound thing happened. It wasn't like that, but I felt like energized. And it was a very like, it was very noticeable. And yeah, I would say, especially since I started eating beef tallow and just beef on a daily basis, that has been the biggest thing that's improved my anxiety, my just general happiness. Um, and yeah, I will also add when I was vegan also, and I've always had really bad anxiety, even when I was a kid. So it was like veganism made it 50 million times worse. And again, because so many people have anxiety, I just assumed it was normal. I remember, I don't even know how I got through my bachelor's degree, but somehow I did. We had to do presentations up in front of the class, every single class almost. And public speaking has always been one of my biggest fears. And I remember every single presentation I did, I had like a panic attack. And I don't even know, truly don't know how I got through it. But I thought it was just normal. I thought it was just like that I was anxiety prone and that it was just something I had to deal with. But now, looking back, I can see that I barely have any anxiety now. So I know that it was a circumstantial thing. It was the way I was eating that was causing such severe anxiety for me back then.
Oh, absolutely. The difference in myself is night and day. It's been unbelievable. The anxiety, as I mentioned to you, the improvement with the depressed symptoms. It's undeniable that it was all diet related for me because I had never had that as a kid, even as a vegetarian growing up, the anxiety and the sort of depressed symptoms at the end stage there. But those last few years, I didn't realize how bad I had gotten. And now I know because the brain fog has lifted, the illness, my, weight's coming back, the self-esteem's raised. But I look back on that time, I'm like, oh my goodness, I was really in a dark, deep place. It was scary. I'm sure the same for you. It was a really scary time. And as I always tell people, I cannot recommend that diet to anyone, please. It just is it's just not a good way to eat for anyone, man, woman, child. I don't think so. Are you the same?
Oh, totally. I would never, I don't really get into it with a lot of people because I know it's like a general thing now that people just believe veganism is healthy. Like I've had coworkers too, because I work with mainly women that are like, because they know I never eat the processed food, obviously, that we have at work, and whatnot. So I've had coworkers be like, "Oh, you eat really healthy, right? Like you probably eat like tofu and stuff." Like they've said things like that to me. And I'm like, "No." And they don't get it. Yeah. Like they associate veganism with eating healthy. And it's just, it couldn't be further from the truth, but that's why I don't get into it with people. Cause then if you start talking about things like this, then they just think that you're crazy and it's just not worth it. But, yeah, I've totally seen that also.
This segues in. I'll add one of the questions in now, Josie, to you that I sent to you earlier. That meat makes me happy submitted a question, and this is a good one for both of us. But I'd like to get your thoughts on how to get through to vegans who are suffering but brainwashed deeply. It ties into what you just said a little bit.
That's always a question that does stump me a little bit because I know looking back on my own life and my own experience how hard it is to get through to somebody like that because they are not going to see it until they're ready to see it, and that is just the unfortunate truth. But if you want to expedite the process, I would say just showing them testimonies of people that have seen profound changes in health. If they have a specific health issue that they're dealing with and you know that it's because they're vegan or that it could improve significantly because that person is vegan, I would say to show them testimonies of people who have healed it, including animal products in their diet again. I mean, there's that. There's also I I mean, I think this was what woke me up the most, honestly. And maybe this was what kind of took away some of my guilt when it came to eating animal products again. Are you familiar with the Spheria epitome of malnourishment videos? That, okay, for anybody that doesn't know, this YouTuber, I actually think his account got suspended, but you could still look up the epitome of malnourishment. I'm sure other people have reposted them. He splices together these videos of vegans either just acting crazy, or this was the most profound example that stood out to me, where he would take somebody when they went vegan, like a clip of them when they first went vegan, and then show them years later, and you could just see how mentally they've declined, how appearance wise they look so much older. You can see it, and that woke me up more than anything. But it was also after I decided to stop being vegan already, so it was like I had the eyes to see and hear, be willing to hear it. So it's really hard. You can really you can just present the arguments against veganism to people like that, and if they don't want to listen, then you have to just let them be. Like, honestly, sometimes discovering it for yourself is the only way you're going to get out of it. And this is why it honestly is so hard sometimes to like give commentary on vegans, because I truly never want to group them all together. I was the same way in that I had no interest in going to anybody's profile and degrading them for the way that they eat. I don't care how other people eat. So even who was it? I think there was this girl, Raw Alignment or Raw Vanna. I think actually they're two different YouTubers that both stopped being vegan, but one of them started a raw carnivore diet. And I remember hearing about it when I was vegan, and I was like, not gonna do it, but good for you, I guess, if you're doing better. Like, it didn't insult me in any way that somebody else was doing better or trying out this what I deemed a crazy diet at the time. So I think it does highlight that people that feel the need to do things like that have mental issues. I mean, that's not to say either that I didn't in my own way back then, but like, and that's why I try to point out the cult-like mentality of people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Josie, before we go any further, I'm conscious of your time. If we go a little bit over the hour, are you okay for 5 minutes or so after?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I have.
Aw- Awesome, cool. Let's get into now, Josie, what you eat today and how you've sort of altered that initial carnivore diet. People are really interested to see how you tweak it, things that you have in there that may not be completely animal based. What do you eat on a daily basis? What are you doing?
So I did see a lot of people asking about fat to protein ratio. I unfortunately don't track things like that, but I do eat a lot of animal fat. I have no issues. I go for the fattier pieces of meat. So I'm sure I eat a decent amount of fat. I couldn't tell you how much exactly I eat. So I was doing strict carnivore for a while. That was really what improved my gut at the time more than anything. That was what really healed my gut, basically. Since then, so I've had periods where I experimented with adding certain plant foods back in. Coffee has been a constant for me, so I've always had coffee. I did start adding back in some low carb fruit, but otherwise I eat primarily animal based. And that was actually because I got the flu pretty recently. And when I got the flu, I completely lost my appetite for everything. And the only thing I really wanted was like, I remember I really wanted like melon, and I just really wanted condiments. I didn't want to eat plain anything like plain eggs or meat. So I tried that for a little bit to get myself to eat. And I think because I just had the flu, it just made me feel icky again. So I took those things back out. But then after I was better from the flu, I still like was having appetite issues. So I started adding back in just like a little bit of like organic bell pepper. I saute that sometimes. And like just add it like as a little tiny like condiment basically with meat. Things like that. I add like a little bit of avocado sometimes, but overall I eat unprocessed meat, like especially beef for the most part. Eggs, and like really any type of meat, but I do primarily eat ruminant meats. I will say that.
Awesome. Um, I noticed in a recent interview you did with someone else that you said that you took out the last holdover in terms of condiments for you was Tabasco. You really like Tabasco. Do you still use it? Are you using it now? I know for me personally, I've recently experimented with removing all seasonings besides salt, and it's actually helped me take it to my gut to a little next level because I, like you, still from time to time will get issues with either constipation or diarrhea, depending. So I took those out and I'm seeing some benefit. How about you? What have you found?
I did do that for a time, and I will say I think it helped a lot. Um, I've gotten to the point where my gut is healed. Obviously, when I had the flu, I got diarrhea, but otherwise, my stools have been normal again. Like I don't even consider myself to have colitis anymore, but technically, I always will. Like it'll always be in remission. Um, so I did actually start having Tabasco sauce again because it really like I don't want to like blame it on this, but it honestly was because I really like after I got better from the flu, I had this issue where I had zero appetite, so I felt like I needed to just add a few things back in to get myself to eat. And so far, it hasn't negatively affected my digestion. I think because I gave myself that like reset period. And you know, if I do notice anything, obviously I'm gonna go back to taking certain things out to make sure that my digestion stays where it needs to be. But right now I can handle it. I've seen a lot of cases where that other cases basically where that has been the person's experience. I don't know if you're familiar with Healthy with Nicole, but she also was vegan. She got really severe ulcerative colitis. She did strict carnivore for a period of time and then added like some fruits back in because eventually it just like ended up working out for her that she could do it.
Oh, okay. No, that's really interesting. Okay, so what I think we'll do now, Josie, is I'll go into some of the other questions, and it kind of segues nicely in because the first question I have for you ties into what you're eating on a daily basis and as well into whether or not one of the questions DKD Free asked is, did you have any oxalate dumping? So for me, I definitely did, and I know my journey includes them and continues to include them. So I added back in, I have half a banana with a handful of blueberries every night in some heavy whipping cream. Is kind of like a little treat for me at the end of the day, and it's worked really well for me in terms of my oxalate dumping. It really slows down the process. Have you noticed anything, and what type of fruits do you add in, or did you get any oxalate dumping?
So I'm not 100% familiarized with what exactly the symptoms are. Isn't it like headaches and fatigue and stuff?
It can rear its ugly head in a myriad of ways. Basically, it can come out in your stool, it can come out in your sweat, it can come out in saliva or urine. So you think urine, kidney stone pain formation. In your stool, your gut kind of gets really badly affected. You can actually see some people have the crystals coming out through their skin because what the oxalates are crystals, the rapide crystals in plants. But yeah, you can get headaches, fibromyalgia pain. You can get fatigue again. It can be pretty brutal for some folks.
I honestly, I mean, I'm trying to think back to when I did start like a full, like a pretty strict carnivore diet, which it's never really actually been strict carnivore because I've always had coffee. But when I wasn't including anything else, I might have experienced some headaches. I never really looked too much into oxalates. So maybe that was also why I didn't take any steps to mitigate it. But yeah, I would say maybe headaches, fatigue a little bit, but never anything too extreme. And again, I can only attribute that back to because I took plant foods out of my diet so slowly throughout that 6 month period as I reintroduced animal products. That's why I know I'm like the type of person too that does like to do things 0 to 100, but I really I I try to stress to people basically when they ask me about doing it slowly, like should I transition? Yes. Like in my opinion, yes. It's probably the best idea if you want to stick to this way of eating.
Yeah, yeah. Josie, one question that just came in down below is how many meals do you eat a day currently?
Usually too, but I have little like smaller meals if I'm in the mood. So like maybe a snack. I most days though I do have two, and then maybe a snack like before I go to bed.
Yeah. Last question related to food. What do you think about flour products?
Like
Like a cooking flour, I guess, you know?
I mean, I'm not interested in eating that. That would not be okay for my gut, but
Nope, me either.
I do think like because people I do like see the issue with like being too purist about it. So I will say to people if they say like, well, I eat like mostly like unprocessed meat and I eat pretty clean, but then I eat this one thing, I'm like, okay, like I'm not gonna be like the food police. But personally, no, I would not eat white. I would not eat any kind of flour. That especially would be the type of thing that would aggravate my gut.
Yeah, me too. If for me it's vegetables. I knew vegetables as soon as I eliminated all the veggies from my diet. I can't do them, and that's just me. I experimented with what worked for me. I added back in fruits because I needed to help with the oxalate dumping, and it's been very beneficial for me. I haven't had any ill effects, but I encourage folks, as you always do, Josie, is just to try and do what works for you within the confines of being primarily animal based. If it works for you and you feel great, hey, go for it. We're just telling you what worked for us, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ultimately, although I can't necessarily eat this way myself, I do agree with the principles of like the Weston A. Price diet, doing like an ancestral diet, but I'm not going to go eating every single type of food that, because I'm German, that like my German ancestors might have eaten. But I could probably do okay eating certain things that might not be, that, might be like a plant food. But I'm obviously going to stick to doing like I would say it's 70 to 80% animal based diet for the rest of my life unless I want to get sick again.
Yeah. Okay, Josie, as we wind down, I want to make a couple of points, and I've got some fun questions for you. For those folks tuning in, some of you may not know that I'm talking to a famous author. Josie is also an author and has written a science fiction book. Um, Tell us just like in 1 minute, Josie, about that, and congratulations on getting that published. And my next question for you on that is, I know you're working on a second one. Is it almost ready to go?
So I will say I did self-publish it. It's not like it's like I'm not a famous author or anything, but thank you. I appreciate that. It
You are,
is
you are.
It is a young adult science fiction novel, and I always describe it as Stranger Things meets a Cinderella story. It has that sci-fi aspect, but it also has that coming of age aspect with the main character, Lucy. She's a 17-year-old who has been psychic, like clairvoyant, since she was born. And she is I'm so bad at giving a little synopsis of it, but she essentially has to go stay with her sister during her summer vacation. And while she's there, she comes back into contact with a family that mysteriously disappeared while when she was a little kid. And essentially, she ends up liking the younger son in the family, and he ends up losing a family heirloom, basically. So she's in this dilemma of like, do I tell him that I'm psychic and I can help him, or do I keep it a secret because she's been ostracized her entire life for her ability? So that's the general premise.
And what is the name of the book again, Josie, for folks that don't know?
It's called Finding an Evra. And
Oh,
the sequel, I can't say honestly when it's going to be done yet. I had written the entire thing in 2021, and then I have a girl who edits for me, and I sent it to her, and she pointed out a lot of issues, but overall, she actually did love it. So I was happy about that, but she pointed out very important issues that need to be fixed. So I'm in the middle of doing that right now. I really hope that I can publish it next year, but I obviously don't want to put it out there until it's like pristine.
oh, okay, cool. Of course. And where can folks find a copy of that? And how do you spell that, the name Inevra, Finding Inevra?
It is Annevra.
Mm-hmm.
And they can find it on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble's website.
Congratulations on that, by the way. That's amazing. Good for you. When I heard that and you had done it all self-publishing, that's really awesome. So you should feel really proud about that. And I hope folks go out and buy the book just because, support small authors, just like small business, and they're get it out there. Fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So last couple of fun questions, Josie, before we finish off. From me, what's your favorite cut of meat and your favorite way to eat it?
I really like ribeye. I know that's everyone's answer, but other than that, I really like New York strip steak, which I know they taste really similar, so that's not surprising. My favorite way to eat it is probably on the grill, although I don't grill very much. It just tastes the best by far that way.
Oh, I agree with you. I like those two, and we're very similar there as well, Josie. Your favorite place to eat out now that you're animal based, where do you find that you like to go?
I haven't been to a restaurant yet, honestly, that I really got something I really wanted to eat. Whenever I do go out to eat with my friends, which is like not very often these days, I honestly think most of my friends know that I eat really like boring now, so they might not really invite me out because of that, but whatever. Um, when I do go out with my friends though, I just usually get like a plain burger patty and eggs. I get something that I know will not have any other stuff in it.
This will be an interesting one for you, Josie. Your favorite book.
Um, ooh, I don't have a favorite book now, I would say, but when I was younger, I loved the Twilight series, which is like so embarrassing now.
Yeah,
But
that's a
I mean, honestly, if I had to pick one of my favorite books that made a pretty big impact on me, it just wasn't very recently that I read it, was The Watchmen by Alan Moore, the comic book. I actually love that comic book, and I like the movie too. Um, there's this author that I read pretty frequently now named Nelson DeMille. He actually lives on Long Island, so he writes about a lot of places that I know on Long Island. So he wrote this book called Plum Island. It's the first book in a series about a former FBI detective, and he essentially solves this conspiracy going on at Plum Island, which there's like actual like present day conspiracies that they do like animal experimentation there and whatnot. So it was a good novel. It wasn't like sci-fi in any way. It was like, you know, just like cut and dry like a detective kind of novel, but it was good. That is one of my favorite books, I guess.
nice. Last couple, favorite musician and favorite movie.
Favorite musician. So I like this really weird music genre called post-hardcore. It's like progressive
Oh,
metal, and my favorite band is a band called Dance Gavin Dance, and they kind of blend every music genre into their music. It's like a lot of people don't like this band. It's very weird to most people, but they incorporate like jazz and like screamo music, and their instrumentals are very complex. So that's my favorite band. And my favorite movie is Across the Universe.
okay, nice. Okay, and the last question, Josie, is where do you see yourself in 5 years, or where do you want to be in 5 years? What do you want to be doing?
Oh, that's a good question. So honestly, I don't necessarily know what my goal is with my account right now. I'm trying to figure that out. I love sharing content, and honestly, like I would like to start creating more complex type of videos on YouTube that like kind of dive into more actual research and like current events. So if anything, I feel like that's kind of where I'm going with this account. I'm not really inclined to do coaching. I don't really honestly think I have the personality for it. But otherwise, so I obviously would love for my book series to take off, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Obviously, I'm going to keep writing no matter what. But the most realistic thing that I see for myself, so I don't get into this too much on this account because it's just not why people are here, but I have a whole other YouTube channel and TikTok where I just talk about a lot of current events and like conspiracy kind of topics. I've always found stuff like that to be very enticing. So I make YouTube videos about stuff like that, and I have a TikTok that has about the same amount of followers as this account does, and I most realistically see myself going further with that account, and hopefully that being able to like be my like main source of income eventually. But that's all like so speculative, so we'll
Well,
see.
I'm putting it out in the universe for you, Josie. You're a good person, and I wish you all the success with your novel writing too. So I think it's going to happen for you.
Oh, thank you.
Josie, someone asked, what was the name of that band again that you like, the musician?
Dance, Gavin, dance.
Dance, Gavin, dance. Okay, so there you go. Josie, thank you so much for today. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I've appreciated this chat more than you know. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Where can folks find you besides this account here on Instagram at the X Plan Eater? I know you have a YouTube channel as well, right?
Yeah, so you can find my YouTube videos, which are a little bit more in depth than what I post on Instagram. I have a lot of what I eat in a day's on there. That account is also called the Explant Eater. And then if you're interested in my book, as I did say, it is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Awesome. Thank you, Josie. Take care and have a great day, huh?
Okay, you too.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to the good folks at Carnivore Bar and Equip Foods. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. And also, don't forget you can book me for a 30-minute carnivore coaching session through Avero Health. Again, the link will be in the show notes. Until the next time, be well.